Well, hello everybody. It's Dr. Drake 63 here today. Thank you for joining me on my YouTube channel. Today, I specifically want to talk about preparing your rifle for deer hunting season. It's very topical. There's a lot of mistakes I see guys make. There's some real easy ways to do it in terms of what is hunting accuracy and how should you measure your rifle's ability to perform in the field. These are the things that I'm kind of interested in talking about today. First and foremost, and I see this all the time, and I know guys that are very successful hunters that do this. They're just not necessarily firearms guys. I see guys that'll take 2 boxes of ammo, of hunting cartridge type ammo, 270 Winchester, 30-06, and up. And in the process of zeroing their hunting rifle, they will go through both of those boxes in the course of an hour. And usually, almost always, those guys are very frustrated because the guy next to him maybe has some kind of a platform rig that's a bull barrel and weighs 20 pounds and is achieving better accuracy. Well, that's not a hunting rifle. The biggest mistake guys make is assuming that their rifle is going to tell them anything when it's warmed up from shooting 20 or 40 shots, and they just keep making adjustments on their scope every time, chasing something. I don't know, chasing the expanding groupings, and that's just a huge mistake. It's a huge mistake. You have to trust your math when you're making this all happen. And that's why when you mount a new scope, the first thing you want to always do is go to 25 yards, especially if you haven't bore sighted it, and take a shot and take a couple so you know you've got a fouling shot or whatever out of the way. And basically at that point now, guys, what we're talking about doing is doing the math, okay? If you're 2 inches low and 2 inches right at 100 meters, well, 2 inches would be 8 clicks. Okay, so 4 for every inch. So if it's 8 clicks at 100 and we're back at 25, and I said meters and yards, whatever, it's just got to be the same thing. If you're back at 25, then that 8 needs to go up by a multiplier of 4. So now it's 32. So if you go to the 25-yard range, and you've got a little group there that shows you that I'm 2 inches right, 2 inches low at 25. You do 32 clicks up and 32 clicks left, and what you're going to end up with is probably real close to that spot if your rifle's any good and if your scope's any good. Now, here's a word of caution. There are some scopes out of there that are a half MOA click, but almost everything I've ever seen in the hunting category is a quarter inch MOA at 100 yards. So anyway, that's just all you got to do, guys. Here's why. When you're out in the field, and especially where hunting season is in a lot of the country, and you can hear the friendly little red squirrel. He is guarding a chestnut tree in my yard. He will come up during this conversation a couple times, I bet. He thinks he's going to scare me off. Anyway, when you're going out in the field, especially during hunting season, the temperatures are colder, you're shooting with a cold barrel. You're not shooting with a barrel that you just shot a box of ammo through. You're shooting with a cold barrel, and more than likely you're only going to get one shot. So here's the most important thing. Understanding what your rifle does with a cold barrel. And here's an example of a group I shot last weekend, because I'm getting my hunting rifles to the zeroed state and ready to go. So real important to understand that. How does your rifle do with a cold shot? Try shooting it with a cold shot before you go hunting. You think you got it zeroed in after your 20 shots or whatever, come back to the range the next time. Here's the only shot that counts. The only shot that counts, guys, is the one that you take when you're with that cold barrel, that one shot. And again, I don't want to go deer hunter on you or anything, but that's really what it's all about. So that's a pretty common mistake that guys made. I've made it. Please believe me. I'm not here to act superior. I just know what I know, and that's one thing I know. There's a lot of talk out there that the more you shoot your rifle, the more accurate it becomes. In fact, I got into a friendly but a debate with another YouTube channel guy. This was somebody who's kind of a big popular following, makes his living doing it guy, and his statement while shooting a hunting rifle was that the more you shoot it, the more accurate it'll get. Okay, let's think about this. Depends on some factors. Okay, first of all, how well is the tolerance of your barrel to your round? And with these button-barreled rifles you see coming, even on budget rifles these days, these things are shooting 1 MOA right out of the box. Oftentimes with the very inexpensive scope that they've mounted to the top of it. However, we all understand that some fouling is going to tighten up those grooves with respect to the bullet. However, the more you shoot, especially this heavier, you know, Remington Core-Lokt, Federal Fusion, whatever you're shooting, these larger calibers, you're going to get copper buildup. So you kind of have a lot of diminishing returns. Yes, it will be more accurate up to the point to where you need to clean that barrel, because once those grooves get to a certain amount of shallowness, you know, where they're cut into the barrel, then they're not going to do their job. And that's one thing that we see when testing chrome line barrels versus non-chrome line barrels, everything else being equal. You tend to get a little bit more accuracy out of the chrome line barrel, and why is that? You know, I don't know. So lots of myths out there floating around that, but the point is if you do a proper sighting in procedure on your rifle every year, the only reason you really want to clean it is to protect it against rust in between, and that's typically what I do. As far as hunting accuracy goes, all this talk about 1 MOA this and 0.8 MOA that is cool. It tells you that you have a platform that's reliable and consistent. However, how big of a spread? What's an acceptable hunting group? I've seen a lot of talk about this, and depends on where you're going to hunt. I mean, if you're sitting in a tree stand and your longest shot's going to be 50 yards, and your rifle at 100 shoots 3 MOA, well, you're golden, man. You're gonna stay within 1.5 inch pattern at 50 yards and drop your deer, no problem. So there's a case where 3 MOA, 4 MOA, probably even 5 MOA at 100 yard works for deer hunting. However, if you're in a more of an open situation, hunting down a power cut, or you're in big sky country, in the desert, wherever you might happen to be, you're going to possibly, or more than likely, have longer than 50-yard shots. So it becomes a little bit more important. The bottom line is this, and this doesn't change. And this is my rule of thumb. Some guys might have a little bit different size, but for me, I'm aiming at a 6-inch target on a particular part of the deer, and you know where the vitals are, where the heart is. Okay, so what distance is that going to work for me? In other words, how far can I go and successfully and repetitively hit that? Well, my typical hunting shot's going to be under 200 meters. I could take longer ones, but I prefer to get a better identification on what I'm shooting, especially if you have an antlerless tag and you don't realize it, but you shoot a Y-buck or something like that. So you need to identify what you're shooting and make sure you're getting the right species in some cases. Where I hunt, oftentimes in Montana, you have whitetail and muleys, and sometimes you can take one, but you can't take the other. That's a for instance. So, but our hunting accuracy we're looking at is that 6-inch target. And again, some guys will say 8, and that's probably fine. I'm just erring to caution. And so what does that translate into? Well, that means if you want to hunt out this, let's just use 300 yards, that means that you need to have a sub 2 MOA group at 100, because you multiply that by 3 and that becomes 6 MOA roughly. So you need to have 2 MOA or better. Now every hunting rifle that I've ever owned will do that. So when I say, well gosh, my Remington 783 will shoot a has shot a half-inch group before at 100, and the best I could ever get out of my Remington 700 is 1.5 inches. Well, I guess it's a way better rifle. Well, it's a more accurate rifle. Compare the two after 20 years of going out in the field every year, and hey, if they still hold up, great. But you're not going to go around grabbing that 1.5 MOA Remington 700 if that's what you have. But don't use that 1.5 MOA Remington 700 to try to take a shot at something at 600 yards. That's just my advice. It's probably not going to happen unless you get fancy with scopes. And that's the last thing that I want to just throw out there. I know this is a little bit of a rant and a little bit of a soapbox. The last thing I kind of want to throw out there is optics. Because here's the deal, guys. When you look at your crosshairs and you're looking out at past 200 meters, in most cases 200 yards, you really aren't going to see what you need to see with precision if you're using one of the lower cost 3x9 optics. Typically you're not. That's why guys that shoot long distance matches aren't using inexpensive optics. But that really becomes the deciding factor, your optics and your mounts. The one thing, a lot of these budget rifles these days come with an optic mounted on them. That optic is typically going to be a 3x9 scope, and it's typically the low end. And a lot of folks think, boy, I need to replace that. It's probably good enough for the vast majority of hunters. What you might want to check are the mounts, because sometimes those are something that could be improved or beefed up. So that's kind of where I leave off. My definition of hunting accuracy. Talked about mistakes guys make zeroing in, and I think that about covers it for today. I'm going to be talking to you a lot during hunting season because it's a big deal for me, and hopefully this year be bringing you a lot of footage from our Montana hunt as well as hunts here in Minnesota. Thanks again for watching. It's DR Drake 63. Have a great day.